I'm in Australia, in Brisbane. Yeah.
That's cool that
It's
my comics are translated in Australian.
yeah, I don't think there's too much difference. Maybe a little bit more swearing, but that's about it.
It'd be funny if they were
Yeah.
like a comedy skit.
Yeah. All right.
The lady on my map on my phone that tells me where to drive, I use the Australian voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so and so we argue constantly. So it's on and off with me and Sheila. So
That's great. I didn't know there was an Australian voice for
there is,
you.
yeah.
That's amazing. I'm glad that you use it. That's
It's the
great.
same as English, but she threatens me more.
Perfect. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Whack, fucking Whack Comics. I'm here with Terry Moore, the writer of Strangers in Paradise, Rachael Rising, Motor Girl, so many more. I cannot thank you enough for your time here with me today, Terry.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The first question is a pretty easy one. For people who do not know about the Terryverse, what is it to you?
It's a word that got started because as I was making different titles, they began to be connected. The first big book I did was Strangers in Paradise, which was basically about, it's hard to do this in reverse, but those two ladies right there, Francine and Kachu. So Strangers in Paradise is basically a story about them. Big cast of characters. And when I went on to do my second title, third title, fourth title, there was always a Strangers in Paradise character in all those titles. And it just began to look like a Terryverse. So that's what it is. All my books have a golden thread through them. It all leads back to somewhere in Strangers in Paradise. You can read them in any order. Whenever you find one, grab it and read it. But you'll be happy to know that if you read, like, say, book 7, and you like that character, she probably has a bunch of history in books 1 through 6.
That's definitely one of my favorite things is when you're reading along and you're like, oh, that's from, you're connecting it all together. It's nice little Easter eggs in each book, really.
Yeah, I actually got the idea from a hero of mine. Growing up, I liked the writings of Robert Heinlein, sci-fi guy. And he got about halfway through his career and decided that one character who was able to live forever was going to be the connecting dot between all of his books. And it became the Heinlein verse. And I was inspired by that. And I thought once I got to where I could do the same thing, I was happy to be imitating a mentor.
That's great. Pocket Girls just wrapped up. I love getting to spend some more time with Katri. What was it like going back and spending some more time with Katri for you?
It's nice because in the first book, Strangers in Paradise, they're young. Their emotions are on their sleeve. They make every mistake you can imagine. And they grow up a lot in that one title. But when I come back to them now, they're more like, more mature. And it's really hard for life to throw something at them now that they can't handle. There was a lot of freaking out in Strangers in Paradise, a lot of big emotions. And now somebody like Kachu is, she walks into the room and she's just cooler than us. It would take a lot to get her to react big time. So I like that. I think it's really cool to watch a character become someone you wish you could be.
Definitely. I've loved watching Katri's journey. It's been a real treat.
I still get letters from young people that, people in their 20s who say, okay, I found this in my teens. And it really helped me to to see that, I wasn't the only one. And now, but also to see like how they got on top of that stuff and found a life and happiness, all that. That was what they needed to see when they're a teenager. Because when you're a teenager, sometimes it just looks like there's a black hole and you don't know where to go. And so to read a book about people that figured it out can be very encouraging. But there's also, the other book titles talk about characters in their 20s and their 30s. I'm not a YA author. My books are not for kids. So I think, you can hit the wall at 32 and think, man, where was all the stuff that was supposed to be here when I hit 30, So there's a lot to write about for 30 somethings as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm 33 and I'm definitely feeling the wall.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how's it going? Oh, geez. And apparently there's a wall at 33, 43, 53, 63. Damn it.
Great. I got that to look forward to every decade. That's
Yeah.
amazing. 5 years brought all your characters together across the Terryverse in a big endgame kind of situation.
Yeah.
What gave the idea to bring all your characters together for that book? And do you think you'll see it happen again?
There was one inspiration note. It was David Bowie. Ziggy Stardust, the very first track, 5 years. We have 5 years left.
Yeah.
And the newsman was crying on TV, and I know he was not lying, and blah, blah, blah. Everybody's freaking out. I just think that's the greatest song ever written. I mean, that whole song is a movie. And I turned it into my graphic novel, basically. I took my characters, and yeah, I write some sci-fi stuff too. The Rachael Rising behind you is horror, but there's a book called Echo that came before that. Echo is sci-fi, where they invented something they shouldn't have invented, because now we're all screwed. And damn it, they want to test it. It's like building a hydrogen bomb. Hey, let's go test it. And if they test it, we're sunk. So that's what the story's about. How do you get it to stop? And the only way they can figure out to get it to stop is this brilliant physicist who's in Moscow on the other team, and but he doesn't want to be doing that work either. And so my gang makes a mission to Russia to get this physicist out, to bring it back and stop the crazy ass people in the U.S. from doing what they're planning on doing, running this crap through a hidden collider in Alaska. So, yeah, I read about all this stuff, world stuff, and then I sit at the desk here, and my imagination runs wild. I like to go straight to, like you said, the end game. If somebody's invented AI, I run about 10 years down the road and think about how we are so bloody screwed. You'll never be able to trust anything again in your life.
Yeah.
There's a story there, and somebody needs to write it right now. A lot of times sci-fi writers are called visionaries, but really they're just people who read the news and looked down the road with it. So
I really loved 5 years for the fact that we got all the characters together. We know that it's a shared universe with different characters showing up in different books, and to finally get to see them all together, Samantha chatting with Kachu and everything like that. Zoe's in the mix, and yeah, it was a real treat to see them all together. And I hope that's not the last time that we'll get to have that giant interaction.
I know it's weird. It was so weird to have the star of that book be in the same room with the star of that book.
Yeah,
like seeing the leads from two of your favorite bands that live across on opposite. Seeing them in the same rooms. You see the Beatles and the Stones in the same room. That's weird. That's not how. This morning I drew. I'm going to see if I can show you this on my phone. I drew a remark for my buddy Mike, who helps us with all the shows and at the warehousing and all that. And it's a picture of Kachu with the strangest team up you've ever seen.
Oh, Cartman, I did see that on your Instagram. That's amazing.
Yeah. So Kachu and Cartman team up to versus Planet Earth. Cool.
That is great. How do you plan out a big series like Strangers in Paradise and Rachael Rising, with 50+ issues and stuff like that?
You would think I would get organized and whiteboard it out, or a bunch of Post-it notes, but I don't. What I do is I picture it like a movie in my head, and what I really do is picture the major emotional scenes. So, for instance, say Rachael Rising, the one up on your shelf. It began with thinking about, um, predators, how much I hate them. And so I wanted to do a story that went after predators. And instead of letting them have all the glory for 90% of the title, and then at the very end, well, that's not very gratifying. So I wanted to really beat on them for the entire book. So what I did was I started with a predator victim, Rachel, um, another of countless young ladies who are buried in a shallow grave in the woods. But this one digs her way back out and goes looking for the guy who did it. And the story wanders with all the other people in town, but she's always on that. That's the one thing that she's always headed toward. But then you begin to discover why she could crawl back up out of a grave, why she can do that, who her sister is, who the real serial killer in town is that had nothing to do with this, but there is one in town. So I just, once I kind of got myself into that setting, it it just ran. I mean, it just kind of happened. It's like playing jazz. You kind of get started, and then you just do your thing and let your heart take you to the destination. It was really great. I mean, to work on that every day. It's it's good therapy. It's a good way to get all your ideas and capture them. It's fun to do.
It is. I'm quite surprised to hear that, because with such a big series like Rachel Rising, it feels very planned out. Like there's so many twists and turns that we come across, and with each one, I was just like, how long has he been building up to that, And you go back and you're like trying to put the pieces together to go up to it. You know what I mean?
Well, that's part of where, if you have that little, the writer bug, if you have that writer, if you're wired that way, um, you try to think about why. It's not about just what they did, but why. And when you get into the why, then you find the logic of the story, and the story tells you where the next place to go is. If all we do is just watch, like if you watch an Avengers movie, well, it's just a lot of action scenes. Then they did this, then they did that, then they did that, then they did that, then they did that, then that happened, then that happened, then that happened, then they attacked, then that. It's just a bunch of that. But if you write a story about real people, it's kind of like, you see the guy and he's hidden every knife in the house. Well, that's just one scene in an Avengers movie. But in a story like this, you think, now why did you hide all the knives in the house? There's a story there. So we go back and look at the story. And it's kind of like an Alfred Hitchcock approach to telling the story, as opposed to, you know, special effects approach. So I focus on the people and why they do that. Why does somebody lose their temper and start smashing cars on the way home? Or, why does somebody decide they want a divorce? You know, that's where your story is. Not the divorce fight, but what led up to it. So once you start thinking that way, I start working on Rachel. Well, she got out of the grave. Now, what do you do next? So you wander home. You try to find your way home. You take a shower. You regroup, and you go visit the first person, the most dangerous person you can think of to help you. And that's what she does. And then just one thing leads to another. It's very logical, really.
It's beautiful. I really love Rachel Rising. All the characters in it are so great. Even the supporting characters. I think Jet and Earl might be my favorite comic book couple of all time. How do you write a relationship like that and make the reader really care for it? Because I don't think I've really cared for a couple like that in a comic book like ever as much as I do for Jet and Earl.
I um I write it from the standpoint of like we all feel like Earl. We all feel ugly and unworthy. Guys, we feel ugly, unworthy. For the last 10 years, we've been walking with our head down. You don't dare look anybody in the eye because you don't want to be accused of the fucking male gaze. So, I don't know, we're just walking around with our head down. And then the first person that's kind to you, that reaches out and holds your hand and all that, is the person you're going to want to talk to. And that's what I was thinking when I wrote Earl. who looks like he's going to be the serial killer in Halloween 7 or the killer in Saw 9. And he's dealing with this corpse on the table, and you're just fearing that he'll do the worst that you can imagine. And it turns out instead, you've got this super nice guy who's going to treat her with dignity and all that. And because it's my horror story, this woman is able to wake up as well. And his kind touch is the only thing she can feel now after her death. And so they bond. And I just thought it was really sweet because who I learned that from? How to plug into an avatar like that in a story is Charles Schultz and Peanuts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I go right back to my childhood, and I always felt compassion for Charlie Brown because every day sucked, but he always got up on Monday and tried again, you know? So
Yeah.
you're pulling for the guy. You're pulling for the guy. And once I grew up and started meeting people that knew Charles Schultz and explained to me what he was like and how he made those things, well, he was Charlie Brown. And Lucy, who said every terrible thing a kid can say to another kid, and was his first wife. He was in
Oh,
an unhappy marriage, and the strip was his therapy. He spent all day at the drawing board because it was a better, happier place to be. And he just put it all in there. Once somebody explained that to me when I was about 30, it was like an epiphany. And I thought, you're not just making this crap up and pulling it out of fluff. Oh, it'd be cute to have a kite in a tree. No, the kite is a fucking metaphor. The tree is a metaphor. The girls are a metaphor. Linus is a metaphor. Charlie Brown is a metaphor. It's an adult conversation, happening with these little figures. Once I saw that, I started working that way as well, and it suddenly, instead of just trying to think of clever things to do in a story, you try to write things that resonate with people, so that when they read it, they thinking, "Oh yeah, thank God," or "Oh geez, no,"
yeah.
as opposed to like "Oh, what, this and that, this and that, this and that." So it's a conscious thing you try to do, but then when you sit down at the table and actually work on it, it's not something you ever feel like you've achieved. You're always striving for it. It's like fishing or something. You're always striving for it, and you never know if you achieved it or not until the book is done and you put it out.
That's a great story about the Peanuts. I never knew that. It definitely makes you look at it in a totally different way, a totally new light.
I feel like I've appreciated him from every angle. I was a child reading about fun kids, and then I was a 20-something looking at it again and admiring his craft. And then I was 30-something, and suddenly, and the entire psychology of it opened up. Geez, there's the genius.
Back to your work, Terry. If you could pick one of your books that you consider peak Terry Moore and you want everyone to read, what would that one book of yours be?
I might always just say my most recent one because it's a journey, and the one that I did everything before just so I could be able to do this one. But everybody around me has different titles. My wife loves Motor Girl, which is about a PTSD war veteran with an invisible friend coping mechanism. So, and you're never going to talk her out of that. She read Parker Girls, the new one, but she didn't, say the same things about it the way she liked Motor Girl. I like Parker Girls now because it reflects our day and time. A tech billionaire trying to take over too much. Who's going to stop him? How do you stop a tech billionaire who's just taking everything over with money? So that's our biggest problem today. One of our biggest problems today, and I wrote about it.
That's great. I do have to agree with your wife. Murder Girl is one of my all-time favorites of yours as well. Such a beautiful book.
Um, that of course comes that is a genre starting in the 1940s with the Jimmy Stewart movie Harvey, where he had a breakdown and came back out of it with an invisible rabbit that helped him see life in a new way. So it's actually a genre. There's a lot of invisible friend stories, and it's not that I wanted to write my version of an invisible friend. It just kind of happened. I was thinking about veterans coming home. We have a lot of veterans coming home over here, and it's just it's awful. Last week you were watching The Most Inhumane Things Possible. This week you're in a grocery store in Chicago. It's just horrible. It's how do you make sense of the world? So I wanted to write about that.
Definitely. I feel like you really tackled the subject of PTSD really well too. I can't imagine it would be an easy subject to write about.
No, and you don't have to go to war to get it. you
No.
you can get it from. I mean, I think people walk around with stages of it and from all kinds of experiences, whether it was whatever happened to you over the last 10 years or what you've been through. I mean, so yeah, I think we can all relate to it a little bit. Um, Unfortunately, it's one of those things that we still have around in society. I think it helps to have a story. You think, well, that's so heavy. Why would you make a comic book about it? Because I think, the most powerful weapon we have is our ability to stare something straight in the eye and smile at it. And that's really the most powerful weapon you hear cancer survivors say. Um, you can't run from it and you can't spend, the next year in bed crying. The most powerful thing they found to do about it is just confront it head on, like an entity, smile at it and be stronger than that, and then choose your own path forward with it. You know. So I think that's how the PTSD thing works too. Eventually, if you can keep from being blindsided by bouts, you're trying to get on top of it is what you're doing. And however you do that, whether it's therapist or an invisible friend, I don't know. But I tried to show one way that this person did it. So a lot of times it happens to people who are incredibly strong and they don't, it's hard to help somebody that won't be helped. No, I got it. I'll handle it. I got my own way of handling this, that kind of stuff. So I don't know. There's a lot to write there. I think, it's important to write about people. The most important thing you can write about is people, not things. So these are the stories that we have in our lives now. And I think it's important to write about it.
Why do you work in black and white, and how do you think your work would change if you added color to it?
The biggest change is that I would sell 10 times more than I do. The biggest change is sales would be so much better. You know how you can see that syndrome just by scrolling through Instagram. You could draw something simple and color it, and it'll get more likes than a black and white drawing that's advanced. So that's just people. But coloring takes a long time, and it costs money. And the reason I stayed in black and white was because I grew up drawing in black and white. I loved black and white, our indie comics, Robert Crumb, and all that. And I made most of those books on a deadline. So I was putting a comic out every 6 weeks, and I was barely making my deadline. And I did that for 30 years. So there's no time. I can't send it off to a colorist and have it. It was just me making the whole book. It wasn't a team, like you do a Marvel book. The writer did it 3 months ago. The penciler did it 2 months ago. The inker did it a month ago. The colorist has it now. It'll be ready on Friday when it's due. You got a team handling it, you know. And when you're an indie cartoonist, it's just you hauling ass making pages as fast as you can, trying to make that one deadline where it goes to the printer. So there you are, black and white. It's going to be.
I personally don't want your work to be colored. I love the aesthetics of the black and white. It's absolutely beautiful, and I think it really speaks for itself in black and white. And yeah, I was just wondering if there was more of a reason to than just time
Um,
and stuff like that. But
and it's also
yeah,
one of those things where, like, unless you find a great colorist,
mhm,
the color can ruin it. I,
definitely.
you know, if I'm drawing something, I think that I want this kind of emotion, and but they did it all in lemon yellows and burnt orange, you know, and
Hmm.
it's the page is not attractive. I worked so hard to get the page, the art to look like what I want it to look like, but then just to hand it off to a colorist and let them have their own approach. I mean, that's really got to be a teamwork situation. That's like co-writing a song. I mean, here, I'll get it started and then you just do whatever you want to it. No, you're going to work closer than that. And I just never did find that partner that, um, and I never did get ahead of my schedule to do it. Maybe
That's
in the Kickstarters era, you know, I don't do those deadline anymore. Parker Girls was my last one on the Diamond 6 week deadline, um, and now going forward, I'm just thinking about Kickstarter releases only. Maybe I'll find time to add more color, but it would have to be a serious co-op thing, or maybe I'll do it. Um, I don't know. I don't know how to let go of control of that.
yeah, yeah, definitely. The color can fully change the whole tone of the story if it's not the right color or what you envisioned.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. Like I said, I really love the black and white, especially in scenes of Rachael Rising when it's snowing, and you know, it just looks so beautiful in black and white. I couldn't imagine it colored at all.
I can't. Just sitting here talking about it is making me antsy. I can't imagine handing the pages over to somebody. It's making me too nervous even thinking about it.
Zoe is another one of my favorite characters from Rachael Rising, and we got a spin-off with her with Serial. I would love to see Zoe again. Have we got any more plans for Zoe? I know there's a big Zoe fan base out there.
Yeah, there is. She kind of became a little bit iconic. Um, you know where Zoe came from? Lizzie Borden. Um, that the axe murderer, the original axe murderer from the
Oh, wow.
19th century. Um, when I was doing comic strips, I started doing these little comic strips about a little girl named Lizzie who had an affinity for the axe in the household, and her Victorian parents were like yelling at each other and yelling at Lizzie. I mean, the whole strip was happening a week before the news was going to happen. Hang on just a sec. I got the book right here. I'll show you. Um, it's in. I was doing it during this book here, Paradise 2, where I was doing comic strips. I don't know if that ever made it over to your side of the world.
I don't
Uh,
think I've seen it. No.
okay, well then let me show you something. It it collects all my early strips before Strangers in Paradise,
Oh, wow.
and all my seminal, or not seminal, but all the work I was doing before I started actually doing Strangers. And one of them was this strip with Lizzie. There was there's one right there with a gorilla. So I had been drawing gorillas all the way back in my strip days, and this was a gorilla who was that woman's husband. Because I just thought, what is the ultimate alpha male? Well, it's a fucking gorilla. So um, I live in Texas, which is a big state full of pickup trucks and a lot of people who think they're alpha males, and sometimes they're not. So anyway, this is Lizzie. Well, this is riveting. Um,
Wow.
so
Well,
Victorian couple. asking the daughter, blonde daughter, and I drew her like the Lizzie Borden movie that I'd seen on TV with that starred Elizabeth Montgomery. So it went from the grown-up Lizzie Borden, who was just one more criticism away from snapping, to this little girl, the little goth girl. So I combined my Lizzie Borden with Wednesday Addams and came up with this little Lizzie character. And this is the prototype Zoe for Rachael Rising and all that stuff. So
That's great to see where the origins of Zoe, where she started. That's amazing.
yeah, it's like, it's kind of like Jeff Smith. You can go look at his early Bone stuff from college and as a kid, you see your character develop. So by the time I got Zoe appears in Rachael Rising, I really had a very fleshed out idea. And the reason why she showed up in Rachel was because in Rachael Rising, I wanted characters to surprise you. I didn't want to make another Halloween movie where everything is typecast and where the killer is actually the scary guy living in that nasty shack out on the edge of town. That's a trope. So what I wanted to do was have the most dangerous person in town be a 10-year-old girl. There you go. I got one. I know who could play that role. So, and then of course, Earl and Jet. Earl is the guy who would look like he would be the ex-murderer in town. He's not. He's the sweetest guy in the world. So I just thought that made the story fresh for me. So I can still get those serial killer scenes, but because it's happening and all those things are coming out of the mouth of a 10-year-old girl, I'm paying attention again. There's another story about where all that kind of mindset comes from too, but I'm telling you a lot of backstories that ate up your time.
Definitely, I'm happy to hear it all.
The thing about miscasting characters on purpose, I got it from Mike Nichols, the director. He was a famous Broadway director for 3 or 4 decades. Before that, he was actually a wonderful comedian, famous for these comedy albums with Nichols and May, Mike Nichols and Elaine May. Very funny, very clever. Anyway, Mike went on to direct in Broadway. And I saw a lot of interviews with him in the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. And he would talk, and he had his scarf on and his tea and everything. He was so deep into Broadway life, actor's life. And he talked about the workshops. And in the workshops, he never actually said this, but I just pictured Mike saying this, that he would have his workshop of actors, and then you got one of every kind of person there in front of you, and you have a domestic scene, say some famous play about 5 characters in a house in the 20th century, and they're working out their family. Well, okay, typecast it, and then have all the actors hand your script one character to the right. I mean, one actor to the right. So now the one playing the mom is going to be the man, the 6'3" man. And the one playing the teenage daughter with the anger issues is going to be the African-American guy who is going to play, the worker or whatever. Totally miscast it. And now read this. Now read it. Now everybody read it and listen to it. And I would hang on every word. If it was typecast and they had the same boring domestic conversation everybody has, I zone out after about 15 and 20 seconds. And then I wait until I hear something I've never heard before, and now I'm paying attention again. Right? And I think that's how most of us are now in our ADD age, where we've got so much media and so many movies and everything. And don't you just kind of scroll until you see something you've never seen before? Whoa, stop and look at that. That's how it is in movies. So you don't have the luxury of writers in the 40s and 50s of like having these drawn out logical conversations. You need to get to the point right now because you're talking to New Yorkers and people that live in big cities, and everybody's pissed off, and they have very little attention span. So get straight to your point in your dialogue, make your point. If you have anything fresh to say it early. Don't hang on to it. And that's how I approach the writing. I really feel that way about you. If I was making anything for the stage or the screen, I would work that way, but I'm not. I'm making these books on paper. And when I write my scenes, that's what I think of. They used to call it start your story by catching a moving train. Never start your story talking about the weather and the town and the setting and all that. Those days are gone. That was 100 years ago. Make your point, and then say something we've never heard before. And that's my goal every time with a scene. So I'm not trying, I try not to stand on the shoulders of comics creators. I try to stand on the shoulders of writers of any genre, directors, actors. You have to look at the whole world's creativity and then launch from there. See, I have a rant about everything, don't I?
That's amazing. That's great.
Sorry.
It's great to hear your inspirations, and because I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people, myself included. So it's cool to see what inspires you to again inspire us. You know what I mean? Like it comes full circle.
When I first started, I was in my 30s, young 30s, and people would ask me questions, and I would be flip or something and say, "I don't know. It just happens, man." And that doesn't do anybody any good. So I've tried to be more open and share it. I want to share my stories, and I want to share whatever I can learn as an artist and a writer and pass that along. I feel like the creative community is one hive, and we got to share our information. It's the only way we survive.
Definitely. So you're saying before that you think you're done with the 6-week format, getting stuff out and dive, and you're going to go to Kickstarter. Do you have an idea of a project that you want to work on next?
Yeah, and the 6-week thing, that means those floppy comics.
Yep, of course.
I made an announcement that I was already thinking about the next story. I did this live weekend chat thing where I did a lot of live streaming, and I announced something, and I said it was going to be space. So I'm just going to leave that out there, that I was thinking about a story about space, and I'm going to leave that there. But I had a really dangerous idea a couple of days ago. So I may say space, and then when it comes to April and it's time to launch a Kickstarter, I may surprise you with something totally different. We'll see.
That's definitely the way it can go sometimes. You're working on an idea, you really like it, and something else pops up, and you're like, I like that one too. Okay, I think I've got something else over here. It's always a challenge to see what one you want to work on. How do you decide with that? When you've got so many ideas bouncing around, what's the one that you jump towards?
The one I jump towards is the one I haven't seen before. So I don't want to do my version of anything that's been done before. And what I want to do is figure out a story that, like, for instance, I never want to do a hero's journey story. I never want to do a Joseph Campbell story. None of that. I want to break the rules, all those old rules, and find something new, a new story about something that hasn't been written yet. When you look back over the last 60, 70 years of books and stories, the ones we adore are the first one that did that,
Yeah.
Same with the bands, right? The first band would sound like this or sound like that. So that's my creative desire. That's always the goal. There were a couple of times, like in Strangers in Paradise, where I managed to figure out a scene that I had never seen before, ever, anywhere, on screen, in book, anywhere. And I was so proud of that I've found something original. So now I would love to be able to figure out an original. The entire title is original. The whole setup, what's happening, how I tell it. That's my goal.
That's awesome.
Wish me luck.
Good luck. Yeah, I know you'll be able to do it because you've definitely surprised me with everything that I've read of yours already, and I know there's still a couple of books that I need to cross off my list from the Terryverse, and I'm definitely going to get to them because you've quickly become one of my favorite writers and artists of all time, and I really always appreciate writers and artists that do both. And you're not only doing both, you're publishing your own work as well through Abstract Studios. So I was wondering, what made you want to publish your own work through Abstract Studios instead of going to a bigger indie publisher like Image Comics or something like that?
The truth is that when I was coming in, when I had wanted to get into comics, I drew the entire first issue of Strangers in Paradise, and I had a Xerox of it, and I was handing a Xerox out to people for a year. And for 1 year, I tried to get somebody else to publish me, and everybody turned me down. And I had the longest, most persistent conversations I had was I really wanted to go to Fantagraphics, because I thought, that would be the suitable home. But I could not get past the guy, the guard dog. And I kept sending him material. He'd make suggestions and critiques, and I would do that, and I just could not get past it. So it never happened. And about 10 years later, I told Gary Groth that, I had tried for a year to get with him, and I could not get past that guy. He said, "Man, I wish I'd known that." But I mean, it probably turned out for the way it should have been. And one of I guess what I ended up deciding after a year of failure was that I was really beginning to realize, I'm waiting for people to see my potential and lift me up out of the crowd and put me on stage and give me a guitar. But it just doesn't happen. And I was beginning to think, I may need to be more proactive. Just submitting it to publishers may not be enough anymore. And then at the last minute, I got a call from this small publisher in Texas, Antarctic Press, and they offered to do a 3-part miniseries. They said, "You've got issue 1. Do you think you could do, 3 more? You can do 2 more?" And I said, "Yeah," because I was already halfway through number 2, so I knew I could do it. And I did it with them. So they actually published the first 3 issues and the first trade paperback. And the amount of money I made off the first 3 issues and the first trade paperback, I made a total of $1,800.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh, geez, this isn't going to work. I'd be better off mowing lawns. This is not a career, and because I was like 33 with a wife and 2 kids and a house and a car. And I was looking for a new career, not a hobby. So right about that time, I was thinking, well, this isn't going to work. And I met Jeff Smith at a store signing. And he said, "No, dude, what you got to do is self-publish, because then you get all the money." And he said, he gave me rough numbers. He said, "Look, say you sell 10,000 copies of a comic, and they sell for, 33, how much they sell for to Diamond, $1.10 each to Diamond, and then you sell them for $3 or whatever retail. So $1.10. So if Diamond orders 10,000, then you get all that money. But if you go through another publisher, they get all that money and they give you 18%. So they take, this huge cut. And you spent all that time drawing it, and all they did was take it and hand it over to the printer. Why would you do that? Why would you let somebody take your money? You do it. You call the printer, and you send it to the printer, and then you make sure the printer sends it to the distributor, and then that's it." And that was the self-publishing model back in the 90s and the zeros. It worked great because back then there were like 19 distributors. And lost you. We're back.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
That's the satellite passing overhead.
Yeah.
He took a snapshot of you in your room. Thermal. They know where you are at all times. So anyway, the distributors folded, and I went to Image for a year, and that's why everybody went to Image for 1 year, back
Yeah,
around whatever. Um, and then things calmed down. We could all go back to self-publishing, so we did, and that's how I stayed from then on.
it's great. I really respect you for not only doing everything yourself on the book, but also publishing it yourself as well with the help of your wife. And it seems like just like a really family effort to get all these books out and to everyone. It's inspiring, really is.
I don't know how you do it without a partner, um, because there's eventually there are enough books and enough business stuff going on that it becomes pretty full time. And in our life, it is full time. But even if you're just doing your one title and you have two trades and 50 comics and you're making prints and all that, that's two people working full time. You're doing your creative all the time, and somebody is always on the phone making with the real world, making things happen.
Yeah,
And that's what I saw out of a lot of people. Um, you know, when I think of the guys who, men and women who made their books, I usually can think of their partner as well because they were always right there. Um, and then if you're not, if it's just you by yourself, I think it's very hard. You can only go so far. You can get a book done, but do you want to do that for 15 years and a lot of books manage it all? It's hard, you know. It's just
definitely.
better off for if you're just a lone individual creator. It's better off using. It was better off using a publisher, somebody that would take you on and just take care of you. But now you have more choices because now we have crowdfunding. Thank God. That's good.
Yeah. I have one more question for you before we get into our writing game show. Uh, I like to ask this question to all the creators that I interview: is what does the comic book medium mean to you?
It's the best of all worlds. You can you can write a novel and then present it to the world like a storyboard movie or a TV show. It's the best of prose, it's the best of visuals, and you have an unlimited budget. If I want to write a scene that says suddenly every window in Sydney blew out, I have the budget for that scene. I can put that scene on the page. If I can say suddenly all of South America disappeared, I have the budget for that in my story. So it's whatever your imagination is. It's a fantastic medium, and you know because I've done both the prose and the comics, the visuals. Um, there's times where you want the prose to do the um, introspection. I want to say introspection. That's not a word. Get in here. Sometimes the prose will get in here to help you do that. But there's a lot of times in comics where you can actually just show that. If you've got a really good actor, meaning you know how to draw expressions, if you've got a really good actor, you can see it in their eyes. And sometimes seeing that expression on somebody's face will hit your heart so much harder than the sentence that described it. So you have that power of the visual power, but you can have as much detail as you want from the world of literature. Also, it's an affordable medium. It comes in cheap little chunks. You don't have to go to the bank to get any of it. It's fairly accessible, um, and it's for the people. It's not like the old days of opera, which was only for the elite and the royalty. I mean, this is for everyone. Anybody can pick up a comic and read it. Nobody's going to tell you no. Um, so I don't know. I just think it's the best of both worlds. I don't know of another medium that's better on it. And even if you said, oh well, what about video games or have such great storytelling now? But I haven't seen one that's doing anything that you can't do in a comic. I haven't seen a movie that does anything you can't do in a comic, or a novel that says anything you can't say in a comic. So I think that's why we have been blessed with such great creative minds in this industry, like Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore, Garth Ennis. I mean, these people that could work in any medium, they chose comics, not because it was easy, not because it was the fastest way to do it. They chose it for a reason, and people need to respect that.
It's a beautiful answer. I absolutely love comic books, as I'm sure as all of us collectors do. And in my room right now, I'm literally surrounded by thousands of comic books, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I think it's my favorite way to consume anything. If there's an adaptation of it or whatever, I'd much rather read it than see it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's a lot more.
On my bookshelf, I have my favorite novels, are right next to my favorite graphic novels. There's no separating it. It's all literature to me.
Definitely. Uh, Thank you so much, Terry, for answering all those questions for me. Now we have the writing game show. Just 5 fun questions for you.
Okay.
See how you go with. The first one I like to ask everyone is, can you please write a short sentence without using E or A in any of the words?
No,
No?
that's my answer.
Oh. Perfect. Short and sweet. I love it. Question number 2. Jet and Earl have a spin-off series like a classic family sitcom like Married with Children or My Wife and Kids. What's the cliffhanger for the first season?
For the whole season? For the whole first
Yeah,
season?
the cliffhanger. What leaves us on the edge to come back for the next one?
Um, damn. And it's not. I can't just actually put them on a cliff and leave them hanging there on a real cliff.
If you want to.
They had an oops, a big oops.
Yeah.
Never go hiking. Hiking is very dangerous. I don't know. How about I don't know. Sharknado. I think
Sharknado?
I think a Sharknado is approaching, and the problem is it's picking up all the assholes from the other town, the people we don't like, and it's dropping them all over Manson. So it's raining assholes, and that's how's that going to turn out? That's my cliffhanger.
That's great. That's a great answer. Next question is, if Boom Studios approached you to write a comic book with Keanu Reeves, and the only idea he had was a guy going berserker in a field, and they wanted you to stretch that idea out to a 12-issue series, what would you do to get it there?
Uh, I would open it that he is living by himself on a farm, say in Australia, and he has a beautiful crop in his field. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And at night, when he's sitting out there with a drink and his dog and watching the moon, he sees a UFO and it disappears. He doesn't know what to think about it. Eventually he goes to bed. He wakes up the next morning. His crop is gone. Now he's mad. He has a fit in the middle of the field. And he goes and looks at the photo that he took of the UFO, and he sees, like "Made in USA" on it or something like that. And he tracks it. Then he begins tracking it down, and he meets a kooky girl that's hitchhiking on the way to the airport, and they go find out where this UFO came from and all that. Turns out they're picking out these crops from all over the world, and they're using the corn to build the next space program that's going to be corn-fed. There's a lot of cussing. You have to go about an hour and a half in before you even see any sex. So it's a great movie.
That was a fantastic answer. I think Beam Studio we should get Matkin out of there and bring you in, and you and Keanu can bring that idea to life. That's
yeah. Keanu's already in. I just talked to him a second ago. He's while we were talking, and he's all in. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. This next question, I know you're a big fan of music. So this is a sort of music question. Can you please give a compelling backstory to a guitar pick that was found at the front of an old? Sorry, let me start that again. Can you please give a compelling backstory to a guitar pick that was found at the front of an old dive bar?
Yeah, it has a little. So, say a guy has been writing songs that mean a lot to him, but every time he plays them for other people, he never gets any good responses. So he's thinking, well, shit, I suck. I guess I guess this isn't going to happen. But why does it mean so much to me? And then the songs don't seem to mean anything to anybody else. And uh, he's um he just did a set at the bar, and nobody paid attention, nobody clapped or anything. And he has a couple of drinks, and then he goes out to get some air. He finds this pick laying on the sidewalk outside the bar. Somebody's standing on it, and they move on. There it is, and he picks it up, and it has like a little, I don't know, a little symbol on it. Maybe it's not a lightning bolt because that already belongs to a guitar player, but maybe it's a diamond or a flower on it. And he takes it home and thinks about it and wonders, like, okay, so somebody was in the bar tonight that plays guitar, and I wonder what they thought of it, and what did they write about? And then he starts on the internet. He finds somebody that's using that symbol as an icon on their Instagram page, and he starts listening to their music, and it sounds a lot like his. And he's now become interested in this person. He kind of reaches out through messaging, and they start talking, and eventually they thinking, well, send me some of your stuff, and they send the stuff over. Um, and that's just kind of getting it started. I don't know if I want this guy to actually. I don't think making it on the stage with thousands of people watching is the goal. I think it's just having somebody who will listen to it. So that's the backstory on the pick, and it turns out that it's this beautiful lady that does not live with cats. She doesn't have a single cat in the house, but she has 3 guitars. There you go. That's something. Find that woman and marry her. Um, and that's kind of what he's thinking when he meets her. And she can outdrink him. And then they play there's a few songs for each other. And it turns out, you've got like this. She's like I don't know if you've heard of her, Jillian Welch. She's a Texas country writer who has a tremendous soul. Everything is so. Uh, she's got a guitar partner that plays with her. He plays this old 1940s acoustic guitar. That is the only one he'll play. It's very cool that he does that. And she writes these incredible songs that are stories. They're little short stories all in themselves. Anyway, she's one of those people in Texas that lives in boots and dirty jeans and an acoustic guitar. And that's who he meets up with. And they start hooking up and writing songs and playing in the bars together. And they become the hottest thing in town the next year. So he was just an unfinished story that needed, and she needed a really good melodic guitar player, and they kind of just like that. I think a lot of creative people wish they could find a creative partner where they could just I wish it could be so much more if somebody could.
Definitely.
If Paul needs a John, right?
Mm.
Being timely with today's news, but not everybody finds a partner, so you do the best you can till you find one. That's what that pick means. You gotta find your pick. Gotta find your partner.
That was great. I wasn't expecting such a beautiful, detailed story with that question, but Terry, you delivered, and I appreciate that.
I actually was just reading it verbatim out of the back of this one. I've already read all that. It's this little cartoon character. She lives in her underwear.
The final question here for the Writers Game Show, Terry, you've done amazing so far. Is Francine and Conturi meet Betty and Veronica? What's the story?
I would like to think that it ends up, for the first time, Betty and Veronica are arrested, and end up in jail. So I think Betty and Veronica end up meeting Kachu and Francine at a comic book convention where it's only the brunettes with their blonde friends, all those characters from the history of comics. Because there's 1,348,000 girl couples who are brunette and blonde, brunette, blonde, brunette, blonde. So there's a convention for that, and that's where they meet, and they have some. They start doing what are they doing? Sidecars. They're just ordering sidecars. Kachu is ordering sidecars one after the other and telling them it's nothing but lemonade. And Betty and Veronica, of course, have never been to a big city before. They live in that little college town, and so they're drinking sidecars. And the next thing they know, it's next week, and, and they just spent the weekend in jail and got bailed out by Archie's dad, that guy with the mustache. And they're really ashamed of it. But Betty finds that she really likes sidecars now. She can't stop. So Betty has a drinking problem, and then Veronica says, "You need to go to rehab." And she said, "I'm not going back to rehab, man." And then they go to rehab, and it's run by Kachu and Francis. Yeah. So yeah, never go to rehab with your drinking partner.
Terry, that was fantastic. You nailed the writing game show right there. You are a true writer, and you can take any prompt and run with it. That was fantastic to hear.
I feel like I failed because not in a single story did I manage to work in Eric Cartman, who really knows to get in every story. Cool. So
that was perfect. I cannot thank you enough for your time, and it's really, like I said at the beginning, it's a real honor to get to talk to you. This last hour has been a real treat. Everyone that's watching, if you haven't read Terry Moore's works, go pick it all up. All of it is amazing. You're on Instagram, Terry Moore Art, isn't it?
Yeah, Instagram. Terry Moore Art is any of my social media, so I hope you'll check it out.
And you got your website there with Abstract Studios where they can buy your work directly, and you even do fun little sketches in them on request as well, don't you? Mm-hmm. It's fantastic. So yeah,
can I leave you with this one thought? When I went to go get my eyes checked last time, I said I want a pair of computer glasses, and they said okay, and I just thought, well, I've got this big 24-inch iMac, and I'll just get big lenses. So I got these glasses that are really big, and now when I put them on, I feel like the old guy with the really big glasses. And everybody thinks that this is what I walk around looking at. I never thought that I'd be doing all these Zoom calls, and this is the face that people would see, is the old guy with the really huge glasses. You know? So I feel like, I don't know, a cartoon character, but my actual glasses are very cool. I hope you will cut me some slack.
Fair enough. You look very handsome with those glasses either way. It's totally fine.
All I heard was blah, 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 handsome. Thank you.
Thank you again, Terry. I really, really do appreciate it from the bottom of my heart.
Pleasure.
And thanks everyone for watching.